Alright guys, I'm back with my second Gatecrash Draft matches, and once again I learned the hard way that Magic Online likes to delete your games. So, playing my Gruul deck, uh, but I don't have all the games. So we'll play the games that we do have. I apologize, I only have 2 games to show you guys. Uh, I got 2 matches in. I won both my first 2 matches and then split with my opponent. Yeah, I know that's a spoiler, but since I only have 2 games to show you guys, I feel like it's probably the best thing if I just tell you outright what happened and why I've only got 2 games for you. So, I have a sweet Gruul deck. If you didn't watch the other video, it's pretty aggressive curve. Got a lot of gas, but anyway, yeah, it's going slow. Okay, there we go. Alright, so this hand is a relatively obvious mulligan. It's only got 1 color of mana. I can't cast any spells. Second hand, it's not a happy hand. You got a Pit Fight and a Homing Lightning and 2 of each basic. But this is a hand that functions. You've got removal to buy a little time. You've got both colors of your mana, so you just need to draw into action to win this game. It's not an unreasonable request. You kind of have to take what you're given sometimes, limited. It's possible that some people would argue you should mulligan this hand again. You should go to 5. But I feel like a Homing Lightning on the play, and you do have a Pit Fight, so should you draw any creature, you have a second piece of removal. It's possible, unlikely but possible, you just get crushed by some savage mana curve of creatures. But so my opponent has an island for first turn, does nothing. I draw a Mugging, which is not a creature, it's not getting me on the board, but it's removal, so it makes it even less likely that I'm just going to die in the first few turns. It's... How do I put this? I'm not excited by this position. I mean, I'm trying to be an aggro deck, and I don't have any creatures in hand. I'm probably not playing any until, who knows when. My opponent has an island, which means he's playing one of the 2 guilds that is, the slowest in the format, and here I am just giving him a ton of time. It's not happy, but at least he doesn't have anything for turn 2. I also don't have anything for turn 3. You'll notice I drew an Orzhov Guildgate. I played a Gruul Guildgate and an Orzhov Guildgate to try to power up Greenside Watcher, to see if that was a reasonable thing to do. I never actually drew both Greenside Watcher and a Guildgate, but I only had 2 Guildgates, so I'm not sure if that means that it's a bad strategy. I'm still not even sure if a Goblin Piker is necessarily a bad creature to play in your Gruul deck. Like, you want to get on the board, and sometimes it'll ramp you. But, anyway, I draw a Ruination Worm here, so, alright, we got a game plan. We're gonna kill some stuff and play a Giant Fatty. So here, I'm just gonna Mugging the Simic Manipulator that he played. If I let it evolve, I might not be able to get rid of it without using the Homing Lightning. And there's just too much risk that he plays 2 creatures next turn, and I just can't ever get it off the board reasonably. So I'm happy to use a Mugging on a Simic Manipulator. That's fine with me. So here my opponent has a Nightveil Spectre. It seems like every Dimir opponent I've run into so far has a Nightveil Spectre. I actually think the card's not very good. I mean, you flip your opponent's top card, whatever. I guess if you run into other Dimir, maybe Nightveil Spectre is awesome in the Dimir Mirror. I don't know. So we draw Zerta Swine. Pretty obviously, we're going to play our 5th land and slam the Swine, which is going to put us finally on the board. And then we have a plan here. We have some gigantic Boom Booms. We have a couple ways to kill his dudes. I mean, it's... If you haven't watched the other video, you haven't seen what the mana curve of this deck looks like, but this is actually quite an unusual draw. There were a lot more 2 and 3 drop creatures than there was... Okay, so I had 4 Zerta Swines, yes. But he's a Blood Rush effect, so you can't really flood on him, at least not if you have an early creature to get on the board with. And I have 2 Ruination Worms, which might be kind of a little bit heavy on the high end. But that's it. Everything else is, like, there's like 1 4-drop and everything else is 3 or less. But so yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about this position now. He's got to have, some pretty good gas. He has Void Walk. This card, Void Walk doesn't do anything. It's just not a card. It's just not a Magic the Gathering card. He gets an island off my Night Veil Spectre, which means he had no land for the turn, so that's pretty funny. I actually don't cast my Ruination Worm here. I decide that I want to Homing Lightning or Pit Fight that Night Veil Spectre, because I'm worried he has some other Cipher card, especially the draw effect, and I feel like, I'll kill that, he'll play something else this turn, and then I'll kill whatever else he plays, and then that'll be sweet. And I'll have 2 fatties on the board. But then he plays Metropolis Sprite, which is just very not worth a pit fight. It's not. Just like Void Walk, I don't actually think that card does enough to be a card. So now I draw a second Ruination Worm, so yeah, now it's pretty obvious the direction this game's going to take. My opponent's going to be forced to try to stop my giant Boom Booms. But if he has them, if he's got the removal spells, then I'm not sure I can win. So he finally has a Swamp. Admittedly, my opponent probably had some mana troubles this game. And he plays Dinrova Horror, which is actually, this might be the best uncommon in blue and black. He gets my Ruination Worm, and I have to dump my Pit Fight. And then I have to trade my Zerta Swine, because I can't just stop attacking. My opponent has 4 cards in hand. I have 3. He's the deck with all the late game. I have tons of Grizzly Bears to draw into at this point. So I have to keep the pressure on, which means trading here. Like, I just have to do it. If my opponent has, like, Midnight Recovery to put on that Sprite next turn, I'm actual dead. I'm, like, the most dead. But he's not going to have it. Spoiler alert. Yeah, he's not going to have it. He sucks. My opponent sucks. I have Ruination Worm. He has Metropolis Sprite. What do you got, buddy? So there's a Bane Alley Broker. Alright, sweet. But he's down to 10 life. Took a couple hits from that Zerta Swine, and now he's going to chump block my Ruination Worm, and I'm going to play another Ruination Worm. So he's going to be... and then, mysteriously, he chooses not to block. This is unfathomable to me, because any Blood Rush creature just kills him there. Like, what is he doing? He's just... I don't know. If he doesn't chump block now, he's going to chump block the next turn. So, I don't know. My opponent plays Ogre Slumlord. So he's a bit 3 life. So it's obviously, what does he got to do? He has to chump twice next turn. He gets a rat out of the deal. But without the Slumlord on the board, the rat doesn't even have Death Touch. So what's the point? I mean, it's... I have 7/6 vanilla creatures. My opponent has all these rares and uncommons that do all these incredible things, and yet he still somehow, even though I did nothing until turn 5, he can't scrape together an advantage on the table. Like, I'm not sure if this is my opponent being incompetent or the Dimir cards being that bad. Anyway, I drew a Gruul Charm, or excuse me, Gruul Keyrune, which I put on the board. It's also lethal now, which is hilarious. So my opponent's, whatever he's got left has to do some serious work here. Unfortunately, he has a Dinrova Horror, which does do some serious work. Puts my Ruination Worm back, and then he's got a Thrall Parasite. So he's got enough guys that he can trade for my Ruination Worm. And since my Ruination Worm doesn't have Trample, I don't activate my Gruul Keyrune here, because that would enable him to block that with Dinrova Horror and then chump the rat on my guy, which doesn't get me as far ahead as just playing another Ruination Worm. Like, I don't actually kill him, so there's no reason to not take the 3-for-1, so to speak. So my opponent then plays Totally Lost on my Ruination Worm, which is, actually kind of frustrating. I should have played my Gruul Guildgate last turn, but I was worried about a third Dinrova Horror. So now I can't recast my Ruination Worm and attack with Gruul Keyrune. But it's still correct to attack with Gruul Keyrune, because it forces him to chump block the Bane Alley Broker, or die. So I'm trying to think if he could have had a removal spell here. If this was just a serious misplay on my part, but I couldn't remember any removal spells that could kill the Key Rune for 1 and, for that mana that he opened. So I just go for it. And then he plays a Dimir Key Rune, and his last card, which is a Balustrade Spy, mills me. And then I go to my turn, and with him at 3 life, I top deck, ba-boom, Slaughterhorn. So he's dead. Right? It's elementary. I'm going to animate, attack, he's going to block. I'm going to Blood Rush, and then I'm going to trample for 3, and my opponent dies. Sweet. I think this game demonstrates the weakness of the Dimir cards. Like, I did actual nothing until a Zerta Swine. And then I played some big dudes, but they were vanilla dudes. They didn't even have abilities. And look at what my opponent played. He had 3 rares and 3 premium uncommons. I mean, Dinarova Horror and Bane Alley Broker are, at least in my opinion right now, some of the best uncommons in Dimir. Granted, his rares weren't like insane bombs, but they were still high power cards. And he just was never even in the game. Like, I was never at risk of losing. So yeah, this to me shows just how poor the Dimir cards are. I'm not sure what would get me to draft Dimir at this point, because all of my opponent's cards seem like high-end Dimir cards. Alright, now we're moving on to the only other game that Magic Online elected to save from this draft. This is a hard lesson learned, and I will fix it next time. We are still playing our sweet Gruul deck, but we are on Game 2 against a Simic player. I won Game 1. I don't even remember the details of how it happened, I just know that I did. So our hand here is basically exactly what you would want for a Gruul deck. I got the Scar Guildmage, Mugging, Gruul Key Rune, Zerta Swine, and both colors of lands. 2, 3, 5. This is my mana curve here. I can go Scar Guildmage, Gruul Key Rune into Zerta Swine, assuming I draw 1 more land. And that's a pretty insane mana curve. Like, at that point, I'm going to have just a ton of power on the board. So my opponent here has a Cloudfin Raptor. I'm just going to snap Mugging this. I'm going to spend all my mana for at least the next 2 turns, and by then I might not be able to Mugging the Cloudfin Raptor. And it's very unlikely I'll ever be able to block it, so I just don't want to be under that pressure. Like, there's just no reason to give my opponent that tempo. You can make the argument that I should wait and Mugging it on the turn I play the Key Rune, but again, he's going to get his 2nd and 3rd turns before I get my 3rd turn, so the Cloudfin Raptor could very reasonably have evolved out of Mugging range by then. So yeah, I think Mugging here every time is the right play. And then on his turn, he's going to play a Frilled Oculus, which is, this is a good card. Actually one of the better cards. I drew Disciple of the Old Ways. I'm going to play that instead of Scar Guildmage, just because if I'm going to lose one, I'd rather lose this guy. Now on my opponent's 3rd turn, he attacks, and I make an interesting play. I want to block, and I'm well aware that he's going to pump and my guy's going to die. But here's my thinking. I'm behind a little bit on tempo, and next turn I'm going to play a Key Rune and not do anything else. Like, I'm not getting onto the board for the next couple turns. And so a bigger risk than losing my Grizzly Bear is that from here he plays an aggressive curve out. Like, let's say he plays on this turn, for example, a Drakewing Crossus. And then on his next turn he plays a Crowned Ceratok. And this isn't an unreasonable series of plays I'm describing. You can replace those 2 creatures with any other 3-drop and 4-drop. And I'm going to be far enough behind that I might actually have to do some desperate plays. There's, my opponent... If I were in his position and I had the hand I'm describing, I would not pump here. Like, just give up not eating the Grizzly Bear in order to get pressure on the board. That being said, I made a lot of assumptions about my opponent's hand. It's entirely possible he just has nothing to do this turn, or is just mana flooded, or all kinds of reasons why he would not have this curve out. Based on what I saw from Game 1, I thought his deck was a lot better than it's going to look in this game. And so this is kind of why I made this play. I was worried about being very far behind on tempo, and I was willing to lose my Grizzly Bear if it could buy me a turn. Um, I don't want to sit here and say this was right or genius or even good, but it was the play I chose to make, and I've laid out my reasoning for it. So I play the Key Rune, and like I said, I was worried I was just going to be way behind here. But by some miracle, he has nothing to do. He just pumps his guy and gets me for 4, which is just kind of baffling. Alright, so here, on my turn, he didn't do anything with his other 2 mana. And in game 1, I saw him have Spell Rupture. So, while some of us are thinking, well, you play your 4th land and you slam Xertaswine. No. What I want to do is play my land and play Scar Guildmage, knowing he can't Spell Rupture me, and then get in with my Gruul Key Rune. I'm actually winning the race at that point, and Scar Guildmage actually puts quite a bit of power on the board. Those animated lands are big. So I'm going to make that play. And then, of course, after combat, I realize I don't have a second forest, and I can't activate my Gruul Key Rune. And so maybe I should have risked the Spell Rupture, but it's still probably the right play to play it like I did. And yeah, I'm writing on the screen with EasyVid's crayon tool that I saw Spell Rupture game 1. That was the whole logic for the play I just made. And I still think it's right. I still think that slamming the Xertaswine there, like if you just get Force Spiked, you're way behind. Whereas once the Scar Guildmage is on the board, that Xertaswine means your opponent's never going to have good blocks. Or at least not going to have good blocks for a while. So he hits me for another 4 here. I'm at 12. But he doesn't play anything. He plays a Sky Games. That's not anything. That's nothing. He tapped his mana to do nothing. So now I'm going to animate and bash. And then I'm going to pit fight his Frilled Oculus. The reason for that is that it's better to get his big threat off the board than play my Xertaswine. Like I can get use out of this Xertaswine at any point in the game. But if my opponent just doesn't have much, then, you know, I'm way better off playing like that. So now, the Xertaswine is going to be a Blood Rush effect. Notice, I'm still playing around Spell Rupture. I haven't given him any opportunity to use Spell Rupture productively. So yeah, I animate my Key Rune, bash, he blocks. I Blood Rush onto my Scar Guildmage. And now I'm ahead in the race. And I've just given him no opportunity for Spell Rupture. You know, Sky Games and Spire Tracer are not the most impressive cards. So here, I'm going to Homing Lightning his Scab Clan Charger, and animate my Key Rune and get in for 5, putting my opponent at 7, or as Scar Guildmage would like to call it, dead on board. Yeah, dead on board. Yeah, so played around Spell Rupture so far this entire game. My opponent has played a bunch of, like, Tier 2 cards that I didn't see in Game 1, and that make me suspect that Disciple of the Old Ways Chump was incorrect. Anyway, so I'm going to animate my land here and attack with it. It gives him... He can either trade both of his guys for my mountain, which would be sweet. Like, I would make that trade all day. Or he can chump, in which case I'm just going to trample for some damage. And again, he's down to 7. I'm at 10. I'm pretty far ahead at this point. I think the game's, I don't want to say over, but you know, he has to have something very gassy in hand or on top of his library to turn it around. So he just blocks the Spire Tracer. Obviously, I trample, putting him at 4, which is the power that the animated lands get. If you haven't played with Scar Guildmage, you may not appreciate him. And this is the game where you can. So my opponent just scoops. He can see that he's dead on board. He's not that dumb. So, there it was. You know, this game kind of baffled me a little bit in that, you know, I played around Spell Rupture the whole time, and I made this really tempo-conscious chump block on turn 3. And then my opponent just didn't have the follow-up that would have made me think this super cautious play was right. But that being said, I think if you have the opportunity to play around something, and you know your opponent has it, like you've seen it earlier in the match, you might as well take that value. But at the same time, there's an argument to be made for just going for it, playing fearlessly as it's called. And I'm not actually sure which is objectively correct here. I mean, I won the game, but given the cards we both drew on each side of the table, I mean, he was playing Spire Tracer and Sky Games. Like, it was just not a winning proposition for him. So anyway, that's the end of my second draft worth of matches. Wish Magic Online recorded them all, but I don't have them. Regardless, thanks for watching, guys.